It's great to be joined in studio today by Richard Stallman, who is founder and leader of the free software movement. You can learn more about this at gnu.org. That's gnu.org. You're a very colorful character, and in my research of you, I came across so many things that I want to talk about. But let's start with maybe what you're most known for, which is being involved in the free software movement. I know that you don't like when people sometimes incorrectly conflate GNU and Linux. We're talking about two different things. So let's just start there. Talk to us about what is GNU and then how does Linux relate to that?
Okay, well, the standard question is, what's GNU?
Right.
And the standard answer is GNU's not Unix,
Right.
because that's what GNU stands for. It's a recursive acronym. It stands for GNU's not Unix. This is programmer's humor, but it has a serious meaning, of course. GNU is the name of the operating system whose development I launched in January 1984, and I decided to make it similar to, that is, you use it the same as Unix, an existing operating system. But the special thing about GNU was it would be entirely free software, entirely freedom-respecting software. The users would have full control over everything in it. Whereas with proprietary systems like Unix or Windows or Mac OS or the stuff in those mobile devices,
Right.
those are not free software. The users do not control them. A company controls those programs, and the programs control the users.
And is that sort of what underlies your advocacy for free software? This
Absolutely.
opposition to companies, big corporations,
It
typically
doesn't
saying,
matter whether they're big or small.
Okay.
The point is, we should control the programs we use and not vice versa. So every program is either free or proprietary. If it's free, that means the users control the program. They control the program separately and they control it collectively. At the same time, both kinds of control are there.
Now, today, there are many more examples of the proprietary than in 84.
Actually, I didn't finish what I was saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I do pause. I speak in paragraphs sometimes. So the point is, that's free software. But if the users don't control the program, then instead the program controls the users, and the proprietor, some company typically, controls the program. So that program is an instrument which gives the proprietor power over users. It's a tool to subjugate people with. That's the injustice that we are trying to put an end to. First step, we escape from it ourselves. I don't use any proprietary software. I won't tolerate it on this computer here. You know, this has only free software in it. We've worked decades to make it possible. You can actually buy a computer pretty much like this that comes with free software already installed for
What
you.
computer is that? Talk to us, especially for people who might only be listening
This
to
is
us.
a ThinkPad X60S.
IBM.
Well, it was Lenovo, but the point is, nowadays they're selling a somewhat newer model in which they've installed free software. The point is, you don't even have to install the system yourself. You don't have to be a wizard to use free software. But the point is, non-free software is an injustice, so we've got to get rid of it. And nowadays, the proprietors intentionally put malicious functionalities into their proprietary software. Companies you've heard of, such as Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Adobe, they put malicious functionalities in. They put in backdoors, meaning they can remotely control it, whether you like it or not. They put in surveillance functionalities that snoop on the users and send information. They have digital restrictions management, DRM, which means it's designed to refuse to do the things you want with the data that you get. And these are all injustices.
Now, let me, before we get too far off, because I want to keep on one area of this laptop that you pointed out, I believe Intel is on the list of companies whose products you don't use, correct? What's the processor here?
This machine was actually made something like 8 years ago. The latest Intel processors are designed with a backdoor that means it can be remotely controlled by Intel or any government that can compel Intel's cooperation, and we
Right.
don't know what all those governments are. You must not trust the latest Intel processors. And if you want more information, look at stallman.org/intel.html, I think.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in more
But the
detail.
point is, it's malicious hardware. We don't know any way to fix that. We can only use older processors at
So
the
that's
moment.
what you have here.
Yes.
Okay.
However, people are raising funds to design a new computer that will be manufactured specifically for free software. It has a non-Intel processor, not AMD either. Their newest processors are no good either. But the point is, we keep advancing. So now you can buy a reconditioned computer with only free software in it.
Right.
But if that project gets funding and succeeds, you'll be able to buy a newly made laptop designed for free software.
Now, why just software? And I guess what I mean is this. Any computer, you could have free software and a processor.
You could have free hardware designs.
Well, I
Theirs
guess
are nice,
my
but here's the
question,
thing,
my
you
question
can't
was
make
this.
your own processor.
Sure, but I guess my question was, that's sort of what I was getting at, right? Which is, if you have a video card, it presumably has proprietary firmware, if not software.
Well,
so where do you draw the line, I guess?
We draw the line between software that comes embedded and that people aren't going to change, and software at the installed levels of the system.
Right.
Because in a physical piece of hardware, there may be embedded software that we can't even tell is there.
Yeah.
And that certainly users don't consider changing. You know, every keyboard has embedded software. Every disk has embedded software. The processor may have embedded software. The camera, if there is one, has embedded software.
I'm guessing you would never have a laptop with a built-in camera, right?
Well, I'd probably tape it over.
Yeah.
I have I've used such a laptop, I've taped it over, but that's a different issue. If you've got free software, you can be sure it's not turned on. With a proprietary program, you can't trust the developer. Every proprietary program gives you zero security against its own proprietor. The only way that you can have security against the people who develop the software is if they don't have ultimate control. In other words, if it's free software. We, contributors to free software, we don't have ultimate control. We can't make users accept sight unseen whatever we've done. The users can all see, if they look, what we've done. They can compare versions. They can check it. And if they don't like what we've done, they can change it. This is what it means to say the users have ultimate control. Now, the power that proprietary developers have, well, power corrupts. And they have total power over those users, and they know it, and they are thoroughly corrupt. I would say that putting in malicious functionalities is corruption. And if you want to see the full story about the malicious functionalities we know of, look at gnu.org/proprietary. There are dozens of examples there, each one with a reference in the press.
Why do you think that because what you're telling us about should be of concern on a day-to-day basis to many more people than I believe it is a concern for? Do you think it's people have lives that they're living and they don't necessarily have the time to look into the details?
Part of it.
What do you think it is?
But also, you've got to realize that the media, when they cover technology, are funded by advertising by these same companies. And these companies don't encourage the media to consider these questions. If you look at product reviews, you will see that they don't talk about the question of the license of the program. To what extent do the users control it? How can they trust it?
Right.
And I once saw a comparison review of a GNU software package that I had written with various proprietary programs that did a similar job. And the review considered only practical dimensions. It didn't consider the ethical dimension or the freedom dimension at all. So I wrote a letter to the editor afterwards pointing out that this most important point of all was omitted.
What publication was that?
I don't remember. This was in the 1990s.
But in other words, they were talking about features, functionality, speed, etc.
Yes,
And they ignored
exactly.
the underlying, what you
They
consider to
ignored
be
the
the
most
ethics of the
important
software.
thing because they never talk about that.
Right.
In 1998, the free software movement was hit by a co-optation campaign designed to separate our software from our philosophy of freedom.
Right.
That campaign goes by the name open source. Now, the reason you've heard that term so much is that a lot of companies preferred to talk about open source, and they wanted the media to talk about open source precisely because that didn't rock the boat. It didn't criticize their proprietary software, didn't call it an injustice. So the companies have put their weight behind the use of the superficial term that doesn't raise ethical issues.
It's very PR friendly to say something
Yes,
is
it
open
is.
source, right?
Right. And they've talked about our work in connection with their slogan so much that most people think that's what I stand for. I refuse to go normally to any event that uses the term open source because I don't want to feed that error.
Well, I want to talk about that. Yeah, let's pause briefly if we can, because I just want to take a short break,
Okay.
and then we're going to talk about more. I'm here with Richard Stallman in studio. You can learn more at gnu.org. We're still with Richard Stallman here in our Boston studio. He is the founder and leader of the free software movement. You can learn more at gnu.org. Before we move on to some other topics, Richard, you were going to sort of wrap us up on this idea of the confusion sometimes between GNU and Linux.
Yes. In 1992, the GNU system was almost complete. One component was missing. And then Mr. Torvalds released a program called Linux, which did that job. So Linux filled the last gap in the GNU system. But lots of people got confused, and they thought that the whole combination was this one-piece Linux. So if people say that they're using Linux, they're actually using GNU with Linux.
Right. And I think that is a confusion that is very common, especially if you look on
Yes.
the internet. Okay. You don't use Airbnb, Amazon, Amtrak, Apple, eBooks, Eventbrite, Evernote, Facebook, Google, Intel, LinkedIn, Meetup, Microsoft, Netflix, Pay Toilets, Skype, Spotify,
For
Twitter,
different
and Uber
reasons.
for different reasons. Okay,
Yes.
so question one is there any underlying principle
they're
between
different
all of these?
They're different reasons. I
Okay.
can talk about any one of them. Several of those companies I refuse to use because they require users to identify themselves.
Okay.
That's why I won't take Amtrak. I take the bus. I pay cash. I don't show an ID.
Do you have credit cards?
I have one which I use only for airlines and if I were going to rent a car.
Okay.
And the reason for those exceptions is they make you identify yourself anyway. So I wouldn't accomplish anything by paying cash. But the point, and you shouldn't have to identify yourself for a domestic flight. It's wrong to track people.
Well,
That's
you
also
do need
why I
to.
won't.
So let's explore that a little bit. In order to go, when you go through TSA, they do check an ID. So
exactly.
even if you
shouldn't
could,
for a domestic flight, you shouldn't have to.
so you're against that.
Yes.
Okay.
But I can't really find an alternative to flying.
It's tough.
But I can find an alternative to Amtrak.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no reason to make people identify themselves. Same for Uber. I also call it Goober because it pays drivers peanuts.
Right.
But my main reason for absolutely refusing it is I won't say who I am, and it requires people to run a non-free app to book a ride. I won't run the non-free app. And I also won't tell who I am. I'll use an ordinary taxi. You don't have to say who you are for those.
That's true.
And it's the same thing for many of those other companies, but not all. And by the way, I do occasionally use the Google search engine, but I don't identify myself. I connect through Tor, and I block the JavaScript code from the site so that Google can't effectively track me. There are other things in my browser also to prevent tracking.
Along those lines, something that I found interesting, and I'm curious to get your feedback on, is that you're big on Pepsi over Coca-Cola, and you cite these deaths that took place in Colombia related to Coca-Cola.
It's not particularly, I'm not for Pepsi.
You're against Coca-Cola.
I'm participating
Yeah.
in the boycott of Coca-Cola.
Fair enough.
Which Coca-Cola company, not just Coca-Cola, the product, but anything that company makes. And in many countries, you have to drink bottled water for health reasons.
Sure.
But I make sure it's not from Coca-Cola Company. It's not that I think that their water is any less safe than any other bottled water,
Sure.
but I participate in that boycott.
So here's my question, and here's what's
They were
interesting
accused
to
of
me.
working with the paramilitares to murder union organizers and their families
In Colombia.
and in Guatemala.
Right. My question is this. There's a sort of analogy that one could make between the concept of proprietary software and the concept of Pepsi's proprietary recipe for their drink.
Actually, no.
In what sense isn't there?
No, you've got the analogy wrong.
Explain.
The right analogy is between a recipe and a program. Just as a program produces output, the recipe produces output, which is food, or in this case, a drink. But I don't reject output made from proprietary programs. What I refuse is to do my computing by running proprietary programs. Now, what would be the cooking analogy of that? With a human cook, there is none. Basically, you can't give a human cook a recipe to use that the cook won't know.
Correct. In order to make a recipe, you have to know the recipe.
What it is.
Yeah.
You're aware of what you're doing.
Sure.
And not only that, you find that cooks all share recipes when they want to.
Sure,
They
but
treat
I
the
mean, I think that
recipes
that's a
as
sort of
free.
semantic
No,
distinction.
but it's not. They treat the recipes as free for the same reasons. You should be free to redistribute the software you have. You should be free to change it, and cooks do change recipes. And cooks even will occasionally write down their changes on a copy of the recipe and hand that to a friend.
Sometimes.
These are they're free to do it when they want to do it. They're
Right.
not required to.
In the
They're
same
free
way that
to.
a software company could
No. Sorry, you've got it wrong. The point is that every user of a program should be free to do these things, and that's the definition of free software. Freedom 0, freedom to run the program as you wish. Freedom 1, freedom to study the source code of the program and change it to function the way you wish. Freedom 2, the freedom to make exact copies and give or sell them to others when you wish. Freedom 3, the freedom to make copies of your modified versions and give or sell them to others when you wish. These 4 freedoms define free software. And you'll note that when cooks do those things with recipes, they're assuming the same 4 freedoms with their recipes. And recipes should be free.
Sure.
But the point is, recipes don't have a distinction between source code and executable. There are no compiled recipes because recipes are executed by human beings, not by computers.
Sure,
but
it's
if you
not
had
exactly the
cooking
same.
robots,
Yeah.
if you had cooking robots, somebody would start selling, or maybe just giving away, it's just as bad, proprietary recipes where you're not allowed to know what the steps are.
Only the robot
And you're
knows.
blocked from sharing the recipe. This would be the same evil as a proprietary program.
Interesting.
And I would fight against it in the same way. But I don't mind that some food was cooked using a proprietary or a private recipe.
Yeah.
Just as I won't reject something that was made by a computer just because someone else was running a proprietary program. I don't boycott companies because they internally use Windows. I'm just sorry for them.
Okay.
They're the ones who are losing freedom if they're running Windows or Mac OS or any proprietary program.
Yeah.
I would say to them, I hope you free yourself. You too deserve to control your own computing.
Right.
But I won't boycott them because they lost their freedom.
Interesting.
I refuse the non-free software myself. And I won't lead anyone else to use it because then I'd be leading that person to lose freedom.
Are there areas of life that are challenging because of the number of companies and their services that you don't use?
Well, there are some meetings that are difficult for me to go to because they're set up such that you have to use Eventbrite to register, and I can't talk to Eventbrite. That requires non-free JavaScript code, which I refuse to run. But aside from that, a company has no business knowing who's going to that meeting.
Sure, no, point
Anyone who
taken. But I'm
sets up a
talking more
meeting that
about
way.
the day-to-day life. I mean, as an example for our audience, like the reason you're here.
No, there isn't.
Just to tell our audience, the reason you're here, we do all of our interviews via Skype video, but you don't use Skype. We were fortunate enough that because you're here at MIT, you were able to come here. But there are ways in which you're certainly altering your day-to-day as a result of these boycotts.
I don't do video calls day to day, but
Sure.
I do have a way to do them with free software. I don't know if you're set up to use it.
It didn't work with
But
our system. was
Here's
the issue,
why
yeah.
I absolutely refuse to use Skype. Because if I'm using Skype, I'm talking with someone else that's using Skype.
Right.
And I'm pressuring someone else to use Skype. And that's wrong. You see, if you were using Skype by yourself,
Right.
then you'd be the victim. If you did that once in a while, I wouldn't say shame on you.
Yeah.
But if you're using Skype with somebody else and you're causing someone else to use Skype,
Yeah.
you're doing something wrong to that person. Not only that, you're part of the social pressure that pushes people to use Skype. You really need to, ethically, it's incumbent on you to set it up so that you're not urging people to use Skype anymore.
Now, in our particular case, you would not have been urging anyone to use Skype had you participated in that interview, because we're the ones who already had Skype.
I
right?
know,
Yeah.
but I would be part of the reason why you keep using it. It was my duty to say no,
Yeah.
so that you would look for another way,
Right.
so that I wouldn't be complicit in keeping Skype in its position of power.
And alas, here you are.
Well, here I am. Good.
Yeah.
We found another way.
So when it comes to the speaking that you do and the travel that you do, etc., is your focus continuing to be free software, or do you also delve into some of these other issues with the companies, etc.? What's your main advocacy right now?
It's free software and privacy.
Okay.
And the way we protect people's privacy is by not collecting data about people. Data, once accumulated, will be misused. There are 4 ways the database can be misused. By the organization that collected it. That organization is very likely to try to misuse it, say, sell the data to a data broker,
Yeah.
or mistreat people. Oh, but it can also be misused by rogue employees. And this happened with Uber, by the way. They figured out who was having a one-night stand
Right.
from their data of who went where. And it can be misused by thieves, crackers that break the security and take the data. That's very common. And it can be misused by Big Brother, the surveillance state, which, of course, with the troll as president, is going to be inclined to mistreat people for private reasons of the troll.
I'm shocked you didn't vote Trump. See, I had you pegged as a Trump guy when we met.
No, I'm a Sanders supporter.
No, I'm kidding. That
I
makes
voted
sense to me.
for Jill Stein.
Yeah. Do you see any way back in the sense that increasingly society runs on exactly the type of software you're protesting?
We have to refuse to use it, and we have to organize and say, stop them from collecting that data. By the way, I have a Charlie card, which I use to pay for subways and buses.
So do I.
I only put money in as cash, and every so often I get a new one, so that the amount of effective surveillance they can do with it is limited.
Limited to the cameras in the T stations and on buses,
Right,
I
but
guess.
I don't think they're set up to recognize faces very much.
No, I don't
with
think
that.
so. I was at the MBTA Control Center recently for a program I'm part of with the Anti-Defamation League, and it's very advanced, but I saw no indication of facial
The point
recognition.
is, we have to have laws that won't allow them to do facial recognition. Nobody should be allowed to do systematic facial recognition with cameras pointed at public places, except under a specific court order identifying a particular place in a particular period of time.
Sure.
We need laws to stop the collection of data, which is a threat to dissidents and whistleblowers. You see, democracy requires whistleblowers, heroes like Snowden, because they tell us what the government's really doing.
You see Snowden as a hero.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
If we had time, I would call for 3 cheers for him if we had an audience.
Do you distinguish between what Snowden did and what Chelsea Manning did in the sense
Manning's
that
a hero too.
specifically in the sense that Chelsea Manning exposed actions that were crimes under current law, and while Edward Snowden exposed behaviors that I agree with you in terms of surveillance were not useful, were by statute legal?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter to you.
Because they're a threat to democracy. They're a threat to our society, to our freedom. So Snowden was a hero. And by the way, some of them were illegal because you know that the NSA was making a monkey out of the FISA court. The FISA court could not effectively supervise what the NSA and FBI are doing.
I agree with
but
you.
The point
but
is,
by the letter
but
of it,
this
it was not
It
illegal.
doesn't matter. Well, I'm not sure of that. The
It was
point
a
is-
rubber stamp.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, which means the law is being ignored. But, justice goes beyond obeying laws. And we need to know what the state is doing to us. And Snowden told us Snowden is a great hero. Snowden deserves a medal and deserves to be put in charge of the NSA.
Wow.
But the point is that when you have a war on whistleblowers going on, and that's what Obama started,
Yeah.
how can you have whistleblowers? How can whistleblowers be safe? If the government always knows who goes where and who talks with whom, it's very hard to be a whistleblower. So it's hard to have democracy. If we don't know what the government's doing, we can't decide what it should do. So the amount of surveillance we have now in the US and many other countries puts democracy in danger. It's more surveillance than existed in the former Soviet Union. We must push the level of surveillance down to the point where whistleblowers and dissidents are safe. The reason why I don't have a mobile phone
Yeah.
is that whenever they're on, their movements are tracked. And every mobile phone, there may be a few rare exceptions, has a universal backdoor that can be remotely activated to convert it into a full-time listening device that listens all the time and transmits all conversations through the phone network to whoever it is. And once that change is made, you can't really switch it off either.
Right.
It pretends to switch off, but it's really still running. So I call them Stalin's dream. Fortunately, I found these things out before I had one. I considered getting one, but when I found these things about it, I decided it's my duty as a citizen not to tolerate them. So I don't have one. I do use mobile phones. I use lots of different mobile phones, many of them only once.
You got a burner.
No, it's somebody else's mobile phone.
I gotcha.
I say, could you make a call for me or send a text for me?
Yeah.
This way, Big Brother doesn't generally know it's me. The point is that, oh, by the way, anyone can track you with the mobile phone because there are bugs in the communication protocol between mobile phone systems, which is called Signaling System 7, I believe.
I did not know that.
So that anyone can pretend to be another mobile phone network and talk to yours and say, where has this phone been for the past 6 months or year or whatever? What calls has it made and received? What texts has it made and received? What were the contents of those texts? All that information is available to anyone willing to perhaps break some laws, as well as to Big Brother, who doesn't have to break laws and is probably collecting all of that data massively every week or every day or every 5 minutes. So the point is, it is surveillance so extreme that most people don't imagine it. And if we want to have democracy again, we've got to stop it.
A true cautionary tale from Richard Stallman, not about the future, but about right now, I think is fair to say. You can learn more at gnu.org. So great having you in our studio.
And these files about the companies that I suggest not using or avoiding in certain ways, those are in my personal website, stallman.org.
Yes, I did extensive reading of that website, and I recommend it to everybody in our audience. Thank you.
Thank you.